Hey, what's up, friends? Ray with Docket 10 Works. How y'all doing? Well, guess what, friends? I'm back. Really excited to get back to turning. Hopefully, it's like a bike and I can just jump right back into it because it's been a while. It's been a few months since I've been at the lathe, and man, I can tell the difference. So we're gonna jump right into it. I've got a couple of blanks of live oak. All right. This one is about the size where it needs to be. The other half I didn't cut down soon enough, or this blank I cut first and missed this checking right here. I don't know if y'all can see that. And on the other side, in-grain checking, I didn't cut enough off. So on this blank here, I did cut enough. But it's already starting to go kind of fast. You know, I cut it earlier this week, maybe Monday, Tuesday, something like that. And it's already starting to split. So, you know how it is. If you don't do it properly and you don't take precautions, wood's going to split. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with this. I don't know if I'm going to rough them out or if I'm going to finish them. We'll see. But this is the first turn in Texas. First turn with Texas wood. This is live oak. Beautiful wood. It's got that kind of cool, some people would almost call it spaghetti oak, but spaghetti oak's more of like a burl. This is just a grain pattern of the live oak. So let's get to turning. I guess I wasn't recording. Crap. Okay, so what I did was I fitted up this tenon for these 4-inch long nose jaws on a Sorby. I just went through a big discussion about how to do a tenon and all that. Well, it's going to take me a minute to get back in the groove, guys. So yeah, this tenon looks good. We're running true. Maybe we'll catch more on the next bull as I'm getting back into things. Alright, friends, sorry for dropping the ball on this video and missing that first half of the turning, but I just can't scrap this project because this was the final bull of 2025 turned on New Year's Eve. So we're just going to move forward. You didn't miss a whole lot. I mounted the blank on a woodworm screw, got everything trued up, and then formed a tenon and checked it, or double checked it, with the chuck right there where you saw me. This thing, man. It's going to be fun to take off. Okay, and so during the whole roughing and outside turning of the bowl, the woodworm screw would kind of loosen up or shift, and it would just make a lot of noise, and it really bugged me. So I would constantly have to tighten it up, and right there, you know, I could barely move it, but that vibration went away. So I'm thinking it's going to be fun removing this blank. And I actually found out what it is. It's the actual woodworm screw itself sits in the collar and the housing and is held in by a set screw. The set screw loosened up, and so the screw was not able to come out completely, but it's not locked in tight, and it's wiggling out just so much, and I was having to constantly retighten it. When I took everything apart, I found that the woodworm screw was kind of just walking around inside the set screw and not completely tightened. I might have to Loctite it in. And that's a PMI 3-in-1 woodworm or screw chuck. It's a dedicated woodworm screw. So I'm spending a lot of time here at the bottom. I'm going to keep that tenon, and it's going to be decorative, and I'm not going to reverse the tenon off. So I'm taking a lot of time to blend in and make sure the curve from the bowl finishes into the bottom of the tenon and it's one continuous curve. And so what's happening here is after I tightened that screw chuck down again, it went out of true a little bit, and now I'm having to re-true up that whole edge, and that cleans things up and it gets rid of that vibration, because the piece was perfectly trued until I tightened that screw chuck, and then that was enough to throw it off. And at this point I wanted to put a bead on top, so I'm leaving a little bit of material up there at the rim, and I'm thinking I want a beaded bowl, and that would really help to hold this very steep bowl. The bowl is almost as tall as it is wide. So with me being out of practice, I could have easily done this shear scraping with the bowl gouge, but I want to grab multiple tools and get familiar and used to them again. So this is my homemade refiner that's just made out of cheap Amazon steel, and I patterned it off Tommy's refiner, and it works great. I'm using a grinder burr on it right now, and it's cutting through this live grain or live oak grain beautifully. It's not picking anything up, and it's throwing off fine wispy ribbons with that shear scrape. There's no tear out, there's no lifted grain. This live oak is really good stuff. So far, my initial thoughts on it. I'm going to be searching this stuff out here locally, because the post oak I found is just splitting and cracking like crazy, like really bad, and it seems to be pretty boring. This live oak has really interesting grain in it, and for as far as oak is concerned, and this might become one of my favorite woods here in Texas. Just on note, in log form, just laying around the property, and from what I've gathered and found around, locally, my post oak is splitting like crazy. Huge, deep ingrained checks everywhere. And this live oak that I found has small, tiny little ingrained checks in comparison. So with how much time I have to process wood and get to things, like I said, this live oak might be what I go and seek out, as opposed to post oak. But don't fret, that post oak ain't going to waste, because it makes fantastic barbecue, and I have been smoking with it, and it is great. So again, right here, I'm paying a special detail to the tenon. I want the bottom of the tenon even to be on par with the rest of the curve of the full bowl. Okay, so here I go with the spindle gouge, trying to roll this bead, being completely out of practice, and yeah, it ain't gonna go too well. Hindsight, maybe I should have done some warm-up before I went back straight into turning a bowl. Maybe chucked up a piece of wood and did a little bit of bead and cove practice, but I didn't, so here we are. And I just didn't like the look and feel of it once I cleaned up the top of the rim and cleaned up the damage from the skate back, and just determined that it wasn't worth keeping, and just, instead of wasting a bunch of time on it, it's just better to move forward and get rid of that feature. It's not needed.
Feels like crap.
Okay, and I'm not telling you to give up on designs when things go a little bit rough, but when it's obvious that it's not going to work, just move on. Change it, get rid of it, just move on. Don't sit there and beat yourself up over it, or try and force something that will never happen into happening. You're just stressing out, getting frustrated, and not having a good time. So I'm back to turning and having a good time, and it's just a more clean, classic looking bowl for it. Nobody's really going to miss it, right? I'm the only one that knew it even existed in the first place besides y'all. And, it wasn't needed, and it looks fine without it. So after, I said this before, hindsight, but when I go back and I
Okay, I know
edit
what I'm
these
doing here.
videos and I do these voiceovers, I get to watch my footage and critique myself on what's going on. And right there, that catch you saw, that was me contacting the full wing instead of just the tip of the wing on the top of the bowl. And why I'm having problems with that after watching some of this footage is I've been cheap and trying to reshape my bowl gouges into asymmetric grinds like Richard and Tommy.
I really don't have the dust
Okay, with
collection or
having a
anything else
long
hooked up,
left wing and a short right wing.
so we'll just wet sand it.
Well, so what I'm doing is I'm just sharpening half of the right wing, the front half of it. And what it's doing is it's leaving a dull back half of that wing that when I engage with the wood with it on accident, not thinking right, doing a shear scrape or something, well, it gets catchy or it mars the surface. So I might just have to give up on that idea and either completely reshape into an asymmetric grind or just keep them as standard swept back or fingernail grinds. But right here, I don't normally keep a lot of sanding in my videos, but this is wet sanding. It doesn't take very long and it's not generating a lot of noise. So it gives me a little bit of time to chat with y'all and catch up with you guys and let you know what I'm doing on this project and my thoughts. Because, you know, it's not loud, annoying sanding with dust collection and angle grinders and all that going on. The nice thing about wet sanding is you can turn or sand at 1,000 RPMs. You can basically sand at the speed you were turning with. Because the oil I use walnut oil. This is Doctor's Woodshop finishing oil. It's the same as Mahoney's almost. But it's formulated for wood use. A lot of the, I guess, fatty acids have been removed and this oil will not go rancid on your pieces. So it acts as a lubricant, and that lubricant helps dissipate heat, and it doesn't get as hot and ruin the glue on the Velcro of your sanding pads and on the Velcro of your sanding paper. So you can switch it on and off between the grits easily, and it's not a melted gummy mess like you would normally get if you oversand and got kind of crazy dry sanding. So I like to use wet sanding a lot, especially on this wet wood where I don't have to worry about drying out the outside with a couple of pieces of sandpapers, kind of gumming them up before the wood kind of dries out and starts behaving correctly with the sandpaper. And also, I don't know how this works or whatever, but the sandpaper seems to last a whole lot longer. Normally, I would go through one or two sheets on a really bad cut surface that I really messed up on, maybe 3 sheets of 120. Not sheets, but you know, my little discs with a power sander. On this particular bowl, I could use that 120 maybe 2-3 more times on different bowls from that one disc. The one thing to remember though is to keep your pads and discs that you've used wet sanding separate from your dry stuff, because you don't want the oil to get on there and gum up everything else. And so, you know, I just quickly moved through 120, 180, 240, and 320. Each grit should take progressively less time to sand because the 120 was removing all the defects. Now 180 is just removing 120 scratches. 240 is just removing 180 scratches. And 320 is just removing 240 scratches, and we don't care about the marks that 320 left behind. They're insignificant, they're hard to see with the eye, and they're hard to feel. So, you know, there are other turners that take it a step beyond. Some turners at that point at 320 will just grab a handful of shavings and burnish the wood in. I just like to burnish in some more walnut oil with a blue shop towel. And what that also does is, one, it removes all the slurry and grit that may have been left behind. And two, I'm just burnishing in a little bit more oil. Under lathe power, it's heating the oil up and hopefully increasing its cure time, because, you know, slow polymerizing drying oils like this take 30 days to cure. So, you know, the thought process is while it's under power, while I'm standing here and pushing in with the blue shop towel, that we're creating a little bit of heat and maybe speeding up that process a little bit. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. I have no idea if any of that works or not, but that's the thought process behind it. And this, the shape of the bowl, the size of the bowl, this will 100% be a utility item meant for food consumption. It's nice shape. It could hold a salad for two, possibly. Definitely a salad for one. It could hold stews, ramen, soups, all that good stuff. So the only thing that's touching this bowl is Doctor's Woodshop walnut finishing oil. That's it.
Pretty cool. I'm wondering if I should do the plastic trick.
All right, so the plastic trick is to protect the wet wood from the jaws. And I'm not talking about crushing inwards and leaving the little triangles from being crushed. I'm talking about oak has high tannin content and really reacts to the iron in metals. So if I would put this on raw without the protection of that, when I remove this, there would probably be 8 little black triangles where the oak got ebonized, which might look cool. It might be a cool design and pattern. I've had a couple of pieces do that, and it does look pretty cool, but I don't want it on this
I
piece.
knew that was going to be fun.
Yeah, like I said, I knew that was going to be fun. That was not easy to get that bowl off. So, yeah, I've had that woodworm screw do a couple of things like that before, and it's finally clicked into my head that I need to probably Loctite the actual woodworms, not the woodworm screw itself, but the set screw, because it's a changeable screw. I can go from a 3/8 to, I think it's a 1/4 inch screw to make a small screw or a large screw for that screw chuck. So yeah, that piece does not need to be that tight on there. And there's a nice little shot of the PMI 3-in-1 screw chuck. It's basically a knockoff of Vic Mark's 3-in-1. The only drawback for mine is it only comes in 1.25 inch threads, so I have to have an adapter, and that gets pretty long away from the headstock. One of these days, I'm probably just going to have to pony up for a Vic Mark 3-in-1, because I do like this, the woodworm screw action, but I would just like to have a direct thread M33 screw chuck. These are peeling cuts to bring the top of the bowl back down in line with the rim. I had to take a little bit off to, one, clean up the rim, and then two, clean up that mishap with the bead. So we've got a little bit of material to remove, and I find it just easier and faster to use peeling cuts across the top. Still just a little bit of chip out right there. That is some beautiful wood. I think I want to put the heartwood in the bottom of the next bowl and keep some of that heartwood in there, because you could see there was a little bit of figure in there, and I'd like to keep that in there. It feels pretty good. And I need to improve my camera angles, I believe. So if y'all could, let me know what angles you would prefer. I'm thinking from this angle here, I need to be elevated a little bit more. I don't have, at my last shop in Michigan, I was able to, it had low rafters, and they were 2x4 rafters, and I was able to clamp on, you know, like microphone booms and weird goofy stuff, little cheap kind of things off Amazon that I could just attach to the rafters. I don't really have that option in this shop. It's steel tubing up pretty high. Maybe if I got into welding or something one day, but that's not the option right now. So I'm pretty much limited to clamping onto my microphone stand, or maybe I could do something else, you know, maybe make a little 2x4 stand or something that I can clamp onto. But my thoughts is maybe slightly more elevated at this angle to get more of a top down into the bowl look. Here I am tightening the chuck, retightening the chuck after I cleaned up the face. It's wet wood, it compresses, and you know, the tenon isn't very deep. I have it as a minimal non-invasive tenon because I just want it to blend in. So I'm kind of, this is a really deep bowl. It would potentially be pretty easy to chuck this out of that small tenon if you was to get a gnarly catch or something. So I'm trying to use the spindle gouge, you know, a little 3/8 spindle gouge to use as a depth hole. And I need to just make a real depth hole with an extended drill bit. That's it. Because yay, that spindle gouge worked fine in dry wood and shorter bowls, but the shavings really gum up and pack into that flute, and it's really time consuming to get the shavings out of there in this deep wet wood. So that's going to be one of my first upcoming projects, is to make an actual depth drill. Friends, this is ugly. I mean, this is bad. This if y'all can sit through this, man, you guys are champs, man. I appreciate it. This was not easy getting back into hollowing. Like I said, I think much of it had to do with my grinding and sharpening on my gouges, which is as much art and a technique as turning itself. And the combination of being out of practice of sharpening and being out of practice of turning, this is not a solid demonstration on how to hollow a bowl. This is like watching a slow motion train wreck happening in front of you. So, yeah, but you know, it is what it is. We all go through this phase at some point or another, most of us in the very beginning of our turning career. This just happens to be right now for me. You know, it's like jumping on a bike and riding again, but it's a rough, bumpy, windy, steep road. So, yep, you know, it is what it is, and I'll leave it in there. I'm not going to hide it. You know, I've been away from the lathe for far too long, and muscle memory can only carry you so far from months away. This is one of those things where I probably should have warmed up. You know, I probably should have roughed out a couple of bowls and turned a couple of beads and coves on a bead stick somewhere, but I didn't. So, y'all get to have some entertainment watching me try and pull this off. And honestly, you know, like I said, I get to critique myself coming back and watching this video and editing it. And so what I really noticed is that me trying to keep that asymmetric grind really, really punished me in this turning, because I constantly am trying to take off more wood than I sharpen. even because
Yep, we've
it's a
definitely got to
weird
stop that before we ruin this.
thing to explain, because I can see that whole right side fingernail, but I only sharpened like the first third of it or so. So the second that I try to engage more than that small amount of wood and do a full hogging material removing cut, it just jams up, slides across, skates back, and there's something too that I'm doing wrong. I'm not coming in at the right angle. So my angle presentation is off. I'm Another thing that needs to be fixed right here. It looks decent right now because I really messed post-production with the lighting on the film. But this shop is not lit up enough, and I'm not seeing what I'm doing. I'm basically turning by braille. Everything's done by feel. I can't see into that bowl. I even stopped to try and find a couple of lights, but I have no idea where they're packed away. And so that's another problem. My nose angle, I'm not coming in properly. And so there's zero bevel support when I'm doing a lot of these entry cuts. And that's why I'm skating across so bad. Okay, and right here I'm going to remove the post-production editing I did with the color, just so you guys can see what I mean, how dark the shop is, and why I'm really kind of turning by braille and can't see in there very well. I'm having a really hard time with the lighting on this turning, but I couldn't stop because I didn't want the bowl to warp on me. I probably lost an inch and a half off the height of this bowl, having to come back and fix this poor rim over and over again. Oh! At this point, I probably would have been better off just with some 80 grit and shape the rib that way.
Okay.
When you see me pop my head over and look at the back side of the bowl, what I'm doing is looking at the contour of the curve and the shape of the curve to make sure that I'm matching on the inside. I don't want to hollow straight in and then just blow through the bottom third of the bowl because I'm not following the contour of the outside shape. And so on this particular deep bowl, the top maybe fifth of the bowl is pretty straight walled vertically, and then it makes a rapid angle inwards or you know, and narrows inwards. So that's what I'm really kind of conscious and being aware of, is to not to, you know, I need to thin out the rim and go straight in, but then make my sweeping arc inwards. And right here, before the piece gets too far in and starts to warp, I'm trying to use a scraper to clean up some of those cuts, and that's a negative rake scraper, and I'm just trying to clean up this edge before I progress. Now, this is something that needs to be kind of stressed on Greenwood turning that is different from using kiln dried or air dried wood or a roughed out bowl. Okay, Greenwood will move on you. It will move on you rapidly. So it's a commitment. Once you're at this phase right here, you can't just, I mean, you can walk away for a minute or two. I mean, it's not going to radically warp that fast. But if you was to be at this point where I'm right now, I'm probably a third of the way down, and I decided to go take lunch and be gone for a half hour, 45 minutes, this bowl would be toast. I wouldn't be able to come back and finish it. The rim would oval, and then when I would try and put a tool into it, I would probably blow up the rim because it was just ovaled so bad and I would get a catch. Greenwood turning is a time commitment because it really does move. And this isn't a paper thin bowl, but it's a relatively thin bowl. And the thinner the bowl is, the more movement you're going to get out of it, and the faster you're going to get movement out of it. So it's also like you don't want to be dilly-dallying, and a lot of times, like I said, I'm trying to take big cuts and hollow it out, but my tool's not profile for it. I dropped the ball on that. So, but normally I would try and move through this process as fast as I can because the bowl really starts to move. And then it will forever be hard and difficult to get a clean finishing cuts on that bowl on the inside of it now. And you can't go back and clean up the outside, okay? It's done. That's why I also sand the outside wall. It's you know, solid, because you know, once it ovals and you try to sand under power, you're hitting a high spot, you're hitting a high spot, you're hitting a high spot, and you're missing all the low spots. So that's a little bit of the challenges of Greenwood turning that may not apply to using kiln dried and dry timbers. So that's something that maybe a lot of people don't stress with Greenwood turning. All right, and this is also like being on a spin cycle, you know, for your laundry. Centrifugal force is, you know, blowing the moisture to the rim and outwards, and that rotating force is also creating wind. And so this bowl is rapidly drying and moving around. So time is definitely of the essence and a key factor in a successful Greenwood turning. Because if you take too long, you can feel it. You can feel your bevel bouncing across the warping wood as it's happening. So um, I can't stress that enough for those of you that don't do much Greenwood turning but would like to try, or maybe those who have been trying to process your logs around and you can't understand what's happening and why things are happening. Watch this. Oh,
Way out of practice. Way out of practice.
so that was my traditional bowl scraper, a big Robert Sorby 1.5 inch, and man, I don't know how I didn't blow the bowl up right there. That was so close, and I stopped what I was doing, put that tool down, and grabbed my negative rake because, like I said, I'm just way too far out of practice, and all that work would have been for nothing if I would have blown that bowl up right there. So I just finished with my homemade negative rake scraper. It's doing the job. It doesn't hog material as fast, but with how rusty I am, I really don't need to be hogging material. So, man, that one scared me, man. When I did it, I thought I was going to eat that bowl in the face. And, you know, it's a good thing I'm wearing a face shield, but it's still, I haven't blown a bowl up in a long time, and that was close.
Well, this lighting sucks.
And here we go. Second verse, same as the first. You know, we're just going to wet sand the inside from 120 through 320 with walnut oil. And if you're wondering what that little goofy thing is, I got that from Woodturning Wonders. And man, I need to get a whole bunch more of them. They just fit your hand so good. And it's just a little foam pad. What I need to do is get a set for wet sanding and a set for dry sanding, because what happens is sometimes my slurry and goop will be on the outside of that thing and it will roll off into a piece that I am dry sanding, and then will introduce oil to the equation of something I'm dry sanding. But they're just foam little pads that really fit your hand well, but they're semi-firm, but they have enough give to really match the contours of bowls. And they come in 2 and 3 inch, and they're just the greatest little thing ever. Uh, Really ergonomic and hand friendly, really comfortable. And you know, you can really just get into deep bowls, deep uh, vessels and stuff. And like I said, they hug the contour of curves very well. And as I was in just a minute ago with that negative rake scraper. I'm thinking more of an elevated angle with my camera would probably show less shoulder. The problem gets is when my camera's kind of elevated, I often bump it with my face shield and my head. So, man, if any of you guys have experience with setting up the cameras for this type stuff, help me out. Let me know what you guys are using. Like I said, I've just got a microphone stand and it's not the greatest. I also need to do something about my camera. I'm using a DJI Osmo 4, which, if you don't know what that is, it's an action camera. And it has great resolution. You know, it's got 4K, 60 frames per second, and a really wide angle. The problem is it has no zoom. It's got a 2x digital zoom. So if you'll notice on some of my footage, when I come in and try to show up close work, like detailed work where I'm rolling a bead or forming a tenon or putting grooves in, the quality washes out. And that's because the zoom on the camera is digital. So you're losing quality right there. And then when I try to post production zoom in with the editing software, it rapidly decreases quality. So I need to find a better camera setup. Two, the action camera runs through batteries like crazy, and I end up missing a lot of footage because I don't notice the camera dying, and I go to change the batteries and I missed something. Uh, I'm not sure what happened at the beginning of this video. I don't know if it took a picture instead of recording or whatever, but I missed a full 20 minutes of, prepping the blank with the drill, putting it on the woodworm screw, and turning the outside of the bowl. So I need some recommendations on a camera too. If any of y'all other YouTubers are out there kind of watching my stuff from time to time, I'd like to know what you guys are using. The microphone seems to work great when I remember to clip it in the right area. You hear my voice trailing off because in this video, not in my voiceover, but in my actual turning, because I got the great idea to clip the mic to my face shield. And so anytime I would take off my face shield for sanding like this, it's laying over there on the shelves and the mic's way over there away from everything. So, but if I remember to just clip it like on my pocket or the seam where my shirt buttons up, it works great. It's a great camera. It's Bluetooth, and I can use it post editing like this as a regular microphone. But I really need to come up with something on the camera, and it's kind of a bummer because I blew like $200 on that action camera, and it just hasn't panned out. In the summertime, it overheats crazy fast. I can't do any extended turning footage with it. It's great for selfie mode because of the wide angle lens, and and the wide angle kind of helps for if I'm outside trying to film me doing chainsaw stuff, but it's not the best for trying to get in tight on something like this. Stubbornness and perseverance prevail, and reward us though, because that is a dang cool bowl, man. I really like it. It's a really cool looking bowl. All right, friends, thanks for checking it out. Do the social media things. Give me a like, subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. What else is there? Share it to your social media and give me comments down below. What do you think, man? So it's like riding a bike, but a real wobbly first. I mean, I did all right on the outside, but man, that hollow one gave me. It wasn't easy. You saw me, right? You know, it is what it is. I haven't turned in several months. Really, I've only turned like one or two items since I broke my back, and you know, they've mostly been roughing. So I need practice. I need to get back at it. But thanks for sticking around with me through the hard times of the move and the back and everything else. And I hope to be back getting y'all full-fledged content. You know. So, but yeah, this is cool. I like it. That live oak is some pretty cool looking wood. I have a bad feeling that all the post oak that I find is going to primarily be barbecue wood because it looks like it's pretty boring, right? But this live oak at least has some really cool looks to it. At least in the sapwood, man. That's cool.